Do you remember?
He was leaning back. It was like this. That's what I remember.
Okay.
He was leaning back.
And at no point, at any point, were you able to get him to respond to you or move or get up?
Unfortunately, no, I was not.
Okay. Now, while you were in that car with Daunte, with Mr. Wright, was there another call? Was there a video call that came through?
Yeah.
Tell the jury about that.
It was his mom.
And what happened during that call?
Yeah, it was a video call. She was asking what happened. I know I was delirious. I was just screaming like they shot him. They shot him. And then I pointed the camera on him. And I was so sorry. And I did that because I was sorry.
Okay, we'll take a minute.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I just pointed the camera at him. I was just in shock and I apologize, but yeah.
Okay, hang on right there just so I make sure that I'm clear about what you're saying.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay, take a deep breath. You said that you pointed the camera at him.
Yeah.
And it was his mom on the phone.
Yes.
And you were saying you were just sorry that you did that?
Yes.
And why are you sorry that you did that?
Because no, mom should have to see that she said that on her phone, on a video call. It just out of nowhere, like, I know how my mom felt when she couldn't find me for hours afterwards. So I just know that I hurt her by doing that. And I apologize, Katie.
Okay. So I hear you saying that no mom should see her son dead on the phone, and you know that hurt her, and you apologize for that?
Yeah, just dead, period, but yeah.
All right. Take a moment. After that call, was that when you got out of the car?
I don't recall. I do remember getting out of the car at some point, though.
Okay. Your Honor, at this point, I would offer Exhibits 166 and 167. I don't believe there's any objection.
Could you identify the exhibits?
Those are
please?
photographs of the white Buick.
Is there an objection to those exhibits? Those exhibits will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
Thank you. We'll start with 160. Actually, could we put 166 and 167 next to each other on the screen, please? All right, I'm putting on this screen Exhibits 166 and 167. Is that the white car that you were in?
Yes.
And in Exhibit 167, there's a close-up of some damage to the windshield that I just circled. Is that the side of the car that you were on?
Yes.
And did you sustain some injuries as a result of all this?
I did.
And we'll get into those a little bit later, but do you believe that the injuries that you sustained were related to this crash?
I do.
Okay. You said that you got out of the car. At this point, Your Honor, I would offer Exhibit 29, which is the video of Ms. Albrecht-Payton walking out of the car.
Any objection to Exhibit 29?
Previous objection.
Okay. Exhibit 29 will be admitted over defense objection, which I overrule.
All right, and we will publish that now, please.
Watching me! Okay. Just keep your hands out of your pockets. Okay. Come back here. Come back here. Okay. Come over here. Come over here. Just don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Who else is in the car? Huh? Nobody? Okay, just drop it. Just let it go. Just let it go. Let it go. Let it go. I got it. I got it, ma'am. I will give it to you. Okay, put your hands behind your back. You're not under arrest. Just put your hands behind your back. Okay? You're not under arrest. Just put your hands behind your back. Okay, I'm just going to cover this. I don't know what's going on. Okay, who else is in the car now? Nobody? There's nobody else in the car, it's just you? Who? Him? Who's him? Daunte? Does he have a gun or anything? No? It's just you and Daunte. Okay. Just one other person inside. All right, are you going to search her and stuff? Okay. Huh? Just...
Were you explaining to the officer at that point that there was no one else in the car other than you and Daunte?
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about your injuries. How were you feeling at this point when you were coming out of that car?
I couldn't really feel anything. I just remember my jaw, I just remember walking and my blood was just spilling from my mouth.
And did paramedics take you to the hospital after that?
Yes, I was told not right away, but yes.
And what were the injuries that you learned about that you had? You learned after the fact what your injuries were. What were those injuries?
I had a lacerated lip, so I have a scar. I had stitches. It went all the way through. I don't know what happened, but all the way through my lip. Stitches in my ear and a fractured jaw. I had wires on my jaw for about 6 weeks, maybe a little more. And I sustained like a concussion, and yeah.
So you said you had a laceration, a concussion, a broken jaw, and that your broken jaw was wired shut for some period of time. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did you have to have surgery as well?
I did.
At this point, Your Honor, I would offer Exhibits 30 and 31. Those are the photos of the injuries.
Okay. 30 and 31 will be admitted over defense objection.
And we would publish Exhibit 30 at this time. All right, I've put on the screen Exhibit 30. Can you just describe what's shown here?
That is my left ear.
And sorry, you said that you had to have something done to your left ear. Can you explain that?
Yeah, that is my left lacerated ear. So they had to stitch somewhere in, like, can I write on it or no?
You can use, there should be actually a little pen
I
style.
had to get stitches like right here in that area.
Okay. And then we'll publish Exhibit 31, please. What's shown in Exhibit 31?
That's my jaw. It's my lip too. Where, I believe I probably fit it or something. I don't know, but that's the gigantic hole.
So you said you had a hole in your lip and a broken jaw.
Yeah.
Is this what you looked like the day of this incident on April 11th?
Yes.
Have you had long-term impacts from that broken jaw or the injuries that you suffered?
Yeah.
Can you describe what that has been like to the jury, please?
So my jaw, it's weird. It's this way, so I've had to get used to a whole new jaw. as you can see, like when I open my mouth or whatever, it goes to a certain way, and just like when I sleep, just weird, like that's hard to explain. It. My teeth will just not be aligned, and it'll feel like I'm biting just hard a lot. So it's different, but.
Did you have pain for quite some time?
Said what? Sorry.
Did you experience pain for a while?
Yes.
And were you given pain medications both on this day and afterward to treat your pain?
No, just once after my surgery.
After your surgery?
Yes.
Okay. But the paramedics, did they also treat you on your way?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Sorry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How would you like me to address you? Miss Payton, is that
Yes, whatever is easiest for you to pronounce, yeah.
all right? I'm going to ask you just a few questions about this incident. Do you remember when Mr. Wright was getting out of the car that he was hesitant?
When he was getting out of the car, no.
Yeah. Do you remember saying to him, just do it, just go, when the officers asked him to get out of the car?
No, I do not remember.
Have you looked at the video of this incident?
Not the full one, no.
Excuse me?
Not the full one, no.
Well, did you look at the video of the...
The ones that, sorry.
Just let me finish the question.
Yeah, sorry.
Have you looked at the video of the one where Officer Lucky was telling him to get out of the car, and he was asking why? Did you see that one?
No.
Okay. What video did you look at?
The ones that they published for, like, the world, like on YouTube, the news, just the ones where he was out of the car already, being handcuffed.
So you did not see him going back into the car?
Well, yes, that's the video.
Okay. And let's back up a little. You testified that you had known Mr. Wright for how long?
About 2-3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks. And
Yeah.
when did you first start dating him?
We were never really official because we didn't get the chance to.
Well, he stayed at your house the night before.
Yeah.
How long had he stayed at your house prior to the incident?
Just a couple nights, not too many though, but he did stay with me.
Okay. And when did you first date him? Like you went out, you met him. Did you meet him on social media?
Yes.
Okay. When did you first meet him personally?
When I first met him personally,
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact date, but it was in it's like probably the beginning, like not the beginning, the end of March, in that area, and then yeah. Because if we're talking for 2 to 3 weeks, and then yeah.
Do you remember what you did the first time you met him?
Yes.
What did you do?
We hung out.
What do you mean by hung out?
All right, the objection is granted in part and denied in part.
You stayed at your house that evening before April 11th, correct? And when you woke up in the morning, do you remember what time you woke up?
No, but it was like early, I think.
Excuse
I
me?
believe we woke up early, like around 10.
10 o'clock
Yeah,
in the morning?
I believe so.
Okay, and did Daunte wake up at that time also?
I believe so, yeah. If one of us is up, the other is also up.
All right, and that was about 10 o'clock in the morning?
Yes.
And do you know whether or not Daunte Wright had smoked marijuana that morning?
Yes.
And did he?
Yes.
And was that right after he got up?
I'm not too sure, but I believe so.
Okay. May I have a moment, Your Honor, to make sure I have this, your mandate correct? When Daunte Wright was smoking the marijuana, was that in your home?
Yes.
And were you smoking marijuana too?
Yes.
And I believe the evidence previously was that he, and I might be incorrect on this, that he arrived at his mother's house at about 11.
Yeah.
So, and if you got up at approximately 10 o'clock in the morning, you and him smoked some marijuana before he went out to his mother's, correct?
So, I wasn't sure about the 10, but
No, I
it
know.
was just an estimate, but yes.
Okay. And on the way out there, did you smoke any marijuana in his automobile?
No.
It was just in your house?
Yeah. Well, on the way to his mother's house, yes.
Okay.
No, we didn't smoke in. Like, it was in my house, but on the way to his mother's house, no, not in the car.
Okay, but you smoked it at your mother's house.
Oh, sorry, yes.
And was it one joint, or did you smoke two joints, or did you one? Did
Yeah.
you split it?
We had together. We smoked it together, yes.
And who supplied it, you or him?
Objection, Your Honor, irrelevant.
The objection is sustained.
Okay. And did you, after smoking this marijuana, feel that it had affected you at all?
No, Your Honor. Well, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say that.
But thank you.
No, not any
Okay.
disabling effects, no.
You had observed Mr. Wright prior to this for at least a week or two. Could you tell whether or not the marijuana that he had smoked had affected him at all?
It did not.
You could tell that.
Yeah. Yes.
And why were you going out to his mother's? Do you remember that?
He just wanted to go see his mom. I don't remember specifically what the reason was. We were always together, so.
Did you meet his mom prior to that time at all?
Not personally, no.
And you stayed in the vehicle
Yes.
while he went in the house that morning, correct?
Yes.
And why was that?
Because, I've never seen his son or his mom, so, I just stayed in the car. I didn't want to intrude.
Okay. He didn't want to introduce you to his mom?
Intrude. I didn't want to intrude.
Intrude?
Yes.
And you had two phones that day, fair statement?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you have to answer yes or
Oh,
no.
sorry. Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
So sorry.
And one phone was for you,
Yes.
And I'm not quite sure I understand what the other phone was used for.
He said that what the other phone was used for, it was just both my phones. Like, they were just phones.
Okay,
Yeah. Like,
why did you have two phones?
I just had two phones.
No real reason?
Yeah, I didn't use them for specific reasons. I just had two of them.
And Daunte did not have a phone that morning?
He did have a phone.
Okay, well, when he called his mother, he used your phone, correct?
Yeah.
Do you know why?
Because his phone wasn't working. I gave him my Xfinity Wi-Fi.
Now, after, we'll withdraw that question. I believe he testified, and I apologize if I didn't quite catch it right, because it was, besides being old and hard of hearing a little bit,
Yeah.
I couldn't understand what you're saying because you're crying.
Yeah.
But I believe you said that Daunte drove down the road after he was shot. Is that right?
He did not drive down the road. His hands were not on the wheel.
Okay.
His foot was on the gas.
Well, was his hands on the wheel in the beginning?
His hands were never on the wheel.
And how do you remember that specifically?
I remember that specifically.
Okay, and did he turn on the vehicle?
The vehicle was never off.
Are you sure of that?
I don't think it was, because how would it have just started if it was never...
You may continue.
So, do you remember specifically whether or not the vehicle was on or off?
I do not.
Your Honor, I'm cross-examining the witness.
All right, excuse me. You may answer.
I do not recall specifically.
Okay, thank you. And the injuries you received, which were serious, right,
Yes.
were caused by the car accident.
Yes.
You didn't receive any injuries from any other incident, correct?
No.
And you mentioned on direct examination, I believe you said that you did not have a good past with police?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I keep doing that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
Objection, Your Honor, irrelevant.
I'm going to let you answer. I mean, I think she testified to that. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay. My father was. He is well, an ex-criminal. I don't know what you would call that, but we've had encounters with the law enforcement before, and most times they were never good. Whenever it was around my dad, so it was just growing up seeing, just negative encounters with the police.
Between your father and the police?
Yes.
Not between you and the police?
No. I was
And
too young.
did you live with your father after you were 12 years old?
No.
You lived with your godmother?
I lived with my mother.
And where was that?
I lived with my mother at 12 years old. I was on the east side of St. Paul.
When this incident happened, your mother was living up north. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct.
And you're living down here with your godmother?
Correct.
And that would be in St. Paul?
Yes.
And how long had you lived with her?
I've lived with her since I was about 14.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any redirect?
Briefly, Your Honor.
Yes.
Just a couple more questions. As far as you know, the car was never turned off. Is that right?
Object to that as leading, Your Honor.
Your Honor,
She
he asked,
already answered the question as leading.
multiple times.
All
I'd like
right.
to clarify.
Okay. Counsel, you're going to have to rephrase your question.
I will rephrase. As far as your memory goes,
Yeah.
was the car off or on during the entire time?
I do not recall, but I do believe that it was on, but I do not recall.
Not responsive, the last part of that. She said she didn't remember.
Okay.
That's her testimony.
Counsel, one-word objections, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Are there parts of this incident that are difficult to recall?
Yes, there are.
And why is that?
Because I sustained a severe concussion and a little bit of a breakdown afterwards.
Was this a traumatic incident for you?
Yes.
Your boyfriend was shot right in front of you, right?
Yes.
Object to that as leading and move it be stricken, Your Honor. It's obviously not.
Okay, the objection is overruled. I'll let the answer stand.
Thank you, Your Honor. Based on your memory today, what was the situation with the car when you were pulled over?
Object to that as a vague question. What was the situation? I don't know. What
Would you like to rephrase
I will
that,
rephrase.
Counsel?
Based on your best recollection, was the car off or on and running during your interaction with police that day?
Same objection, Your Honor. She's already asked that. I've asked it.
All right, excuse me. Counsel, could you clarify the time that you're referring to?
Sure. At the time that you were pulled over by the police with Mr. Wright, Daunte, based on your recollection, was the car running? Was it still on or was it off?
It was running.
Okay. Now, at some point after the car drove off,
Yes.
you were removed, is that right?
Yes.
Are you unclear today about when exactly the car was turned off?
Yes.
Okay. Is that what you're testifying to today?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Once again, what your testimony or what your memory is that after, obviously, he was driving the car before he was stopped, correct?
Okay, sorry, say it again.
Pardon me?
Can you say it again?
Yes.
Yeah.
He was obviously driving the car before he was stopped, correct?
Yes.
And when he was stopped, the car was running, correct?
Yes.
And after the car was stopped, you don't recollect, you don't remember if the car was off or on. Fair statement?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, anything further from the state?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Payton, you may step down. Thank you. The state may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Patricia Lundgren to the stand.
Hello, Ms. Lundgren. Please come over by the witness stand and stand behind the witness chair. Raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this case? All right. Please have a seat. And would you please remove your mask?
Pardon?
Remove your mask. Okay. State your full name and spell it.
Patricia Lundgren, Patricia. Lundgren, Lundgren.
Okay, there's a couple of rules in testifying. The court reporter that's sitting in front of you is taking down everything that's being said. So you have to answer with a yes or no instead of shaking your head or saying uh-huh or uh-uh. Only one person can talk at a time. Please wait until the question is finished before you start answering. If you don't understand a question, please let the lawyer know. And finally, if an objection is made, please stop talking immediately and don't answer the question unless I tell you to. All right. Counsel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Lundgren, you might need to pull the microphone a little closer to you so that we can all hear you really well. Okay, let's try that. Thank you. Can you please tell us, well, how old are you currently?
Pardon?
How old are you?
I still didn't catch it.
Okay. How old are you today?
Oh, I'm 84.
And are you currently married?
Yes.
What is your husband's name?
Kenneth Lundgren,
And how old is Kenneth?
86.
And I want to take you back to April 11 of this year. Do you recall that day?
Yes.
And were you in a car crash that day?
Yes.
And were you, well, where were you living? What town were you living in at the time of that crash?
I was living in Brooklyn Park.
Living with Kenneth?
Pardon?
Were you living with Kenneth, your husband?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Still.
Were you living with Kenneth?
Oh, yes.
And when you got in that car crash, do you recall what kind of car you were driving?
I was driving a 2019 Subaru Outback.
And when you got in the crash, who was driving?
I was.
And was there anybody else in the car at the time?
My husband was.
And where was he in the car?
He was in the passenger side.
In the front?
In the front, yeah.
And where were you driving? Where were you traveling when you got into that crash?
I was going home.
And what street were you on?
63rd Avenue in Brooklyn Center.
Do you remember which direction you were going?
I was going west.
And do you recall if you were driving the speed limit?
Yes, I was.
And do you recall how fast that was?
30.
And as you were traveling along, what did you see before the crash? Can you tell the jurors just what happened?
Well, I know I did see the white car coming. Let's see. East on 63rd in the other lane towards me.
And then what happened after that?
Well, all of a sudden, he just cut straight across my lane in front of me.
And did you see it hit anything before you?
Did it hit anything?
Yeah.
I didn't really see, but I don't think so.
Okay. And so, did it hit your car then?
Yes.
Can you describe for the jurors, what you saw, where it hit you, that kind of thing?
Well, when I saw the car coming in my lane, I sort of went to the right side, which is what we all do when there's emergencies. And anyway, we ended up in the same spot.
And so did the white car hit your car?
I think. I'm not really sure who hit who, and then I thought that I missed him, but then I was spinning around in the highway, and of course the bags were all inflated, and my husband was moaning, and I ended up in the eastbound lane, and I was surprised that no one was coming to help me, which you always see in accidents. And then I opened the door and got out. And I did not have any injuries, but my husband did.
Okay. I'm going to back up just a little bit. Before the actual crash, did you cross the center line at all?
No.
Did the other vehicle cross the center line?
Yes.
So it came into your lane?
Yes.
And do you recall where on your car that car hit you?
Well, I think it was like, our front ends met.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it more on the passenger side or your side, do you recall?
I guess it was. I'm not sure.
Okay, fair enough. So at some point, it sounds like your car came to a stop, right?
Yes.
And that's when you said nobody came to the car to help you?
Yeah. When I stopped. Yeah.
And so then, did you get out?
Yes.
And what did you notice, in the area when you got out of the car?
I don't know what I noticed. No one was right around my car. It was strange. And so then I went to the other side and helped Ken get out of his seat.
Okay. When you first got out of your car, did you see any police officers in the area?
Well, I heard the police demanding kind of that the driver in the other car get out. And I saw his, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not.
So maybe my question should have been, did you hear a police officer? It sounds like you did.
Yes, I did.
Now, while we're talking about this, I'm going to show you some photographs, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes? You have to answer yes or no.
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'm going to offer exhibits 33, 34, and 35, the photographs of the vehicle.
Any objection to 34, 35, and 36?
For the record, it's 33 through 35. That's okay.
Okay, those exhibits will be admitted into evidence.
All right. So I'm going to put exhibit 33 up on the screen. It'll show up right in front of you there, okay?
Yep.
So do you recognize the car in that photograph?
Yes.
And whose car is that?
Mine.
All right. So that's the car you were driving that day?
Right.
Okay. And then and so that's the passenger side, correct?
Yes.
And then let's go to exhibit 34. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
That's the car as well, correct?
Right.
All right. And then let's go to exhibit 35. And that's your car on the driver's side, correct?
Right.
So when you got out of the car, you got out from the driver's side, right?
Right.
And did you have to go around that airbag that seems to be there in the picture?
Yeah.
And then when you got out, if we can go back to exhibit 34, You see some police cars in the background.
Yes.
And is that area in the background where you heard the police officer's voice yelling from?
Well, he was on the other side of the street then.
Okay. And so when you talk about that police officer yelling, that police officer was on the other side of the street.
Right.
All right. And so then, I'm sorry, if we could go back to 33, you started telling us that you, well, how did you feel when you got out of the car?
Well, I felt okay, really.
Okay. And so you went around to the passenger side, I think.
Right.
And what did you see regarding Kenneth?
Well, he couldn't open his doors, or I don't know. Anyway, he couldn't get out of the door. And I opened his door then and helped him get out of his seat.
And when you went to his side and opened the door, were the airbags inflated like they are here in Exhibit 33?
Yes, they were.
And when you say you helped Kenneth get out of the car, can you just explain for the jurors, please, what you mean by that?
Well, he really kind of didn't know where he was, and his head was hurting. The side airbags were still inflated and really hard blowing, up. They were really tight. And I had to get him to lower his head to get out of the car.
And so you had to physically help him get out of the car?
Yes, I did.
And as you were, were you able to get him out of the car?
Yes, I was.
And then what did you do after that?
Well, then there was a policeman, what should I say, west of there. There were lots of policemen then, up, going west. And he motioned for me to come back behind his vehicle. And so we did.
And so where did you go, after that? Does my question make sense?
No.
Like, where did that officer want you to go or tell you to go?
He was motioning for me to come back and get behind his vehicle.
And were you still hearing voices of other police officers at the time?
No, I didn't hear anything.
And so how long did you kind of wait behind that police car then?
Well, pretty long, actually. But I don't know.
And at some point, did you get some medical attention out there on 63rd?
Yeah, there were EMTs that were talking to us and, are you sure you're okay? And things like that. And I really was, but Ken wasn't. But he didn't really say he wasn't feeling good,
Okay. And, Your Honor, at this time I'm going to offer Exhibit 32, which is a photograph of the Lundgrens.
32. 32 will be admitted into evidence.
So I'm going to show you Exhibit 32. Can you tell us who are those two people?
That's me and my husband.
So it appears you are standing and Kenneth is sitting.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Behind the police car, yeah.
And so Kenneth is a little bit bigger person than you. Is that fair?
Yeah,
Pretty tall.
he was.
And so this is when you were sitting behind the police car, correct?
Yes,
All right. And you said you waited there for a long time,
yeah,
and eventually the two of you got checked out by an ambulance, correct?
yes.
And did you, well, let me ask you this. Where did you go after being checked out by the ambulance?
Well, we sat in the EMT's ambulance kind of for quite a while, and I really don't know what time. But then we were taken to the police station in Brooklyn Center.
And from there, were you able to get home eventually?
Yeah, we sat at the police station, I think, for 3 hours maybe, and then they didn't have time to talk to us, and of course we didn't know why. But I'm not going to suppose. And then they did take us home about 6 o'clock.
Now, at some point, did you, the next day, seek some medical attention?
Yeah, we went to North Memorial for a checkup, and they took x-rays of Ken's chest. I'm not sure what all, they did at that time.
Yeah. How are you feeling the next day?
I really have felt just fine all the time.
But you went to the hospital because Kenneth was feeling how?
We went to the hospital because I guess we just thought that's what we should do. And we should have gone on Sunday, but we didn't.
So you went and got checked out?
Yeah,
Okay. And were you allowed to go home then?
yeah.
Prior to that day, had Kenneth been experiencing some health problems anyway?
No,
Okay.
not really.
After that accident, have you noticed a difference in Kenneth?
Yeah, great. He is on hospice care now, and yeah, he has lots of problems now.
Fair to say that he had been having some cognitive problems before the crash?
I hadn't really noticed any,
Yeah.
but perhaps.
But since the crash, you have noticed?
Yeah, a lot.
And so he had to go to hospice care for a while?
He was in Covenant Living hospice care, but it's really expensive, and so we have him at home now with hospice care.
So it's not that he's in hospice care just because of the accident, would you say, or is it just he's been a lot worse since the accident?
A lot worse since the accident.
Okay. Those are all the questions I have. Thank you.
Okay, Counsel, you may cross.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Earl Gray. I'm one of the lawyers for Kim Potter. I'm going to ask you just a few questions, and most of them will be about your statement you gave on April 13th. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay, you described in that interview that you said, "Man, we really hit hard," and you slapped your hand. Did you do that?
Yeah.
And you really were hit hard. Is that a fair
Yes.
statement?
Yes. We were.
And your car was destroyed. That fair statement?
Mm-hmm.
And you also stated if it hadn't been a Subaru and your seat belts, you and your husband would have died, correct?
Correct.
And then you asked at the end of the statement, do they have insurance? Did you ask that question? Do you remember that?
The other party, right?
Yes. Who was Daunte Wright? Was he the one driving the other car?
Yes.
And he's the one that hit you head on, pretty much, correct?
Right.
And you asked if he had insurance, correct? I have it.
Probably. I don't remember.
I have it in the statement. I'm not.
Okay.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Is there a redirect?
Nothing further. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. You may step down. Okay, counsel, we're gonna, if you have a short witness,
I do, Your Honor.
okay, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would call Denise Wells to the stand.
Ms. Wells, will you please come over to the witness stand and stand behind the chair? Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this proceeding?
I do.
Please have a seat. You may remove your mask. Please state your full name for the record.
Denise Lundgren Wells.
And will you spell it?
Pardon?
Please spell it.
DenisLundgrenWells.
Okay, a couple of things to keep in mind when you're testifying. The court reporter is taking down everything that's being said, so only one person can talk at a time. Please wait until the question is finished before you start answering. Please answer with a yes or a no instead of shaking your head. Please try not to say uh-huh or uh-uh, because that doesn't make for a clear record. If you don't understand a question, let the lawyer know and it'll be clarified. And finally, if an objection is made, you need to stop talking immediately. I don't want you to answer the question unless I tell you to. All right, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
And if you would tell us, are you related to Patricia Lundgren, who you probably just passed in the hallway?
Yes,
How are you two related?
she's my mother.
And Ms. Wells, we ask everybody this question, but how old are you?
62.
And are you currently working?
I am retired, but also working as a reserve principal right now.
So before you retired, what did you do?
I was the principal for Minneapolis Public Schools.
How long did you work in education?
38 years.
I always like when we have witnesses who are in education because they understand the rule about and uh-huh. So this will be a little easier to enforce with you. But so when did you retire officially?
June 30th, 2021.
And just been doing some part-time work for the school since then?
Yep, the last couple of weeks I've been filling in as a reserve principal.
Do you recall April 11th of this year when your parents were involved in a car crash?
I do.
And how did you learn about the car crash that they were in?
Well, I was on my phone at night with a friend, and my mother called me, and I didn't pick it up right away. And so when I got off the phone, I called her. I listened to her voicemail, and her voicemail to me said, "We've been in an accident. The car is totaled. The guy died. We're tired. We're going to bed. Don't call us."
And not the kind of call a daughter wants to hear about her 80-year-old parents.
No.
Okay. So what did you do after getting that?
Well, I tried to call them, and they didn't pick up. And then I yelled at my husband and said, "You know what, I'm really worried. My parents been in an accident. Someone died. Their car's totaled. I don't know anything else." And so he got in his car and drove to their home and pounded on their door and woke them up. So just to make sure that they were okay.
And so he confirmed they were okay, at least for the night. And the next morning, did you, well, that should be a question. Did he confirm that they were okay for the night, at least?
Yes.
And did you then help your parents the next day?
I was at work, and I called them later in the morning, and they had taken themselves to the emergency room and been cleared. And then later in the day, I called them again, and they were looking through the white pages to find the phone number for the Brooklyn Center Police Department. So I got on I said, "I'll do it." And so they wanted their car. I keep doing, sorry. So I looked up the phone number and called, and then someone called me back and basically said, that your parents can't have their car. It's in custody of the BCA, and until they release it, your parents can't have access to their car. So I called them back and told them that.
Okay. And was there anything particular that your mom wanted about the car?
She wanted to get her coat out of the car.
Okay. And when she was trying to find the phone number for the Brooklyn Park Police Department, well, let me ask it this way. Were they eventually able to locate the car?
Eventually, later, I think Tuesday, 2 days later, after they had a investigator come out and interview them from the BCA, and then their car was released. Prior to that, even though I told them they can't have their car, they were armed with the white pages and heading out to looking for tow lots to find the car, so that they were pretty determined to find the car. And, I again had to say, you can't have that. You have to wait. So.
Did you recognize something called the white pages?
Yes. I say that because nobody that I know or work with would, anyway, in this day and age, use the white pages to do just about anything. But that's what they're used to.
That's what Mom was doing to try and find the car.
Yes.
And so eventually, was she able to get her coat?
Yes, eventually. And all their belongings out of the car.
I want to talk about your dad, Kenneth. Have you lived in the same area as your parents?
I have.
For how much of your life?
We moved to the Minneapolis area, Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, when I was 4.
So you've been in the same area as your parents mostly all your life?
Yes.
And over the last, 10, 15, 20 years, how often would you see your parents?
I see them pretty much weekly, I would say. More so recently.
And prior to April 11th of this year, had your dad been having some health issues?
22 years ago, my dad had an AVM brain bleed. It stands for arterial, it's a mass in the base of his, here in his neck, or in the base of his skull. And he was, it kind of like a stroke. And he recovered. He never recovered totally. He always had his speech wasn't as clear as it used to be, or his ability to multitask was somewhat impaired, and he had been doing well, though. He was functioning, he was driving.
Did that change? Did you notice a change in that after April 11th of this year?
Yes, prior to April 11th, he was still driving. And after the accident, I began to notice that it was increasingly hard to understand him. And his sense of reasoning was why he was doing the things he was doing weren't clear, or his articulation seemed to be getting worse and worse, and I could understand less and less of what he said. And they had a doctor appointment, I think April 20th, and I said, Mom, because I was still working, you have to, when you're with the doctor, I need you to call me because I want to talk to the doctor. And prior to that, I'd never done medical appointments with them before, but I do now. And basically, I told the doctor, I said, something's wrong. His reasoning is he's not making sense, and it's hard to understand him. He's more forgetful. So, yes, I noticed the difference.
Did you see, like, in being around him and others, like your mom, that he was not the same Kenneth as before April 11th?
No, he began kind of obsessing about dying. He called a friend up who, out of the blue, and asked him to sing at his funeral because he was dying. And I then called that friend and said, so how was that conversation? And he was a little taken back, to just get a call out of the blue. So, and my dad was unable to drive anymore. It's been a challenging spring.
And we understand that for some time he went into hospice care.
Yes, he's still in hospice care. He was, his balance has gotten much worse too, and he fell in August and got an abrasion on his knee, and the abrasion became infected. And they tried treating it with oral antibiotics, and they ended up hospitalizing him and putting him on IV antibiotics. And the infection became septic, and so they had to do surgery. So he was hospitalized, and from that hospitalization, he became, this is not my dad ever, but he became really belligerent. They had him strapped to the bed. And they tried to send him to rehab after 2 weeks in the hospital, and he was in rehab in the home, and he wanted to go home, and he ripped his PICC line out, so then he ended up back in the hospital, and they had him in restraints for another 2 weeks, and it's taken a really long time for him to become stabilized. So then he was sent to another home. While he was in the hospital, they did a MRI and found that his brain is shrinking, and he didn't make sense. He was fighting, pinching the nurses. He's a big guy. You saw my mom, she's little. He was a football player and just a big man. And so when he was released from the hospital, so the palliative care was called in, and they have determined that he is hospice. So he's still in hospice. He was in a home, and we've since brought him home, but then we have home health care coming in. My mom can't go get the mail down in her apartment without having someone there 24/7.
And just so you know, I want to be very careful about this. You understand your dad being his age and having some cognitive issues already, correct?
Yes,
But do you think in what you've seen is that since April 11th, his condition has accelerated?
extremely. I mean, he is no longer continent. He has to have all of his medications ground up. You know, I said to my mom, when did he become unable to swallow a pill? And yeah, things have accelerated quickly.
And so you're getting the appropriate care for him at home.
Yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Counsel?
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Earl Gray, Paul Lane, Kim Potter, and Amanda Montgomery. We represent Kim Potter. Did you learn after this accident who was driving the other car?
I did. Actually, I didn't see the news the night of the accident, but the next day I did.
And did you learn that Daunte Wright was the driver of the other vehicle?
Yes.
And did your mom usually drove the car because of his fall a few years back when they were together? Is that
No.
true?
Up until then, sometimes she drove, sometimes he drove.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. You may step down. Members of the jury, we're taking our morning break, so 20 minutes. Is counsel ready for the jury?
We are.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy.
Judge, there's one point I'd like to bring up when I get in here. Both the prosecutor did.
Mike.
Oh.
Thanks.
There's been a habit by both prosecutors of after the witness testifies to something, they repeat the answer. I haven't objected, but I would like them to stop doing that. Because it's not proper to repeat the answer on anybody.
All right. Could you please refrain from doing that? It's kind of lengthens the proceedings. Okay, please be seated. All right, the state may call its next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call Carrie Blansky to the stand.
Good morning. Please stand behind the witness chair. And over here. Next one over. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this case?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please take a seat. And please remove your mask. State your full name and spell it.
Carrie, Kerry, last name Blansky, Blanski.
All right. There's 4 rules to testifying. The court reporter is taking down everything that's being said. You have to answer yes or no instead of shaking your head. And please don't say uh-huh and because we don't get a clear record. Only one person can talk at a time, so wait until the question is finished before you answer. If you don't understand a question, please let the lawyer know and it will be clarified. And finally, if an objection is made, please stop talking immediately. Do not answer the question unless I tell you to. Counsel?
Ms. Blansky, you might have to pull the microphone just a little bit closer to make sure everybody can hear okay. Thank you. I want to draw your attention to April 11 of this year. And if you could just tell us, well, let me ask it this way. At that point in time on that day, were you living in the area of 63rd Avenue and Catherine in Brooklyn Center?
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to show you on the screen sort of an overhead photograph we have of the area. So if we could put up Exhibit 1. Do you see that in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And so is the location where your home is on this photograph?
My home is just slightly out of the photograph on the far right.
Okay. In front of you, there should be one of these little styluses. Can you take that and just actually write on the screen kind of where your home would be in this?
Right. Oops. Sorry about that. There's my house right there.
Okay. So you've drawn a red X there, which would be just to the east of Catherine, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And Your Honor, at this time I'm going to offer Exhibit 2. It's the other photograph of the scene of the area.
Any objection to Exhibit 2? There being no objection, Exhibit 2 will be admitted into evidence.
All right, showing you Exhibit 2. Do you see what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize the area depicted there?
I do.
Would this have any more of your home depicted on it?
We have a lot of tree coverage in our yard, so you cannot see the house, but you can see the trees.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and that, yes, if you would just go ahead and draw it again.
there.
All right. So again, we're looking at the just east of where Catherine runs into 63rd, correct?
Yes.
And prior to April 11th, how long had you lived in that location?
It was 20 years last June.
And 63rd Avenue there, is that a fairly busy street?
It's a fairly heavily traveled road.
Is that kind of a main street in the area?
I would say so.
And living there, have you heard car crashes out on 63rd before?
Oh, yes.
So on April 11th, did you that day hear what you thought was a crash?
I did.
You just described for the jurors kind of where you were when you heard that.
I was in the upstairs bathroom. Had just walked up there, and I heard the crash. I shouted downstairs to my husband, "Was there a crash?" And he said, "Yes, I believe so." I went downstairs, and he had already gone outside, which is what we normally do to make sure everybody's okay. He was outside. I came outside, and he told me that we should stay back. Another police car had pulled up. A police car was traveling west on 63rd towards Catherine and had slowly rolled up to Catherine. The officer had gotten out and was standing in the fold of his car door with his gun drawn. And so we stayed back. We didn't know exactly what was going on, and we were watching from the corner of our home.
Okay. So if I can, could you draw, just mark on this Exhibit 2, the location of the officer with the gun drawn?
Must have been about there.
Okay. And did you see other cars that you thought might have been involved in the crash?
Yes, there was another vehicle that was on the sidewalk on that'd be the south side of, right across from the arrow there.
Okay. And how many cars did you see that appeared to have been in a crash?
Just the two cars, just the white car near where the arrow is, and then there was I believe it was a gray car across the road on the sidewalk.
Okay. And so did you then stay out there for a while and observe what was going on?
Yes, we did.
On that day, April 11th, did you have some security cameras on the outside of your house?
Yes, sir.
And eventually, did you take a look at those videos to see if it had captured the crash?
We did.
And at some point, were you interviewed by law enforcement officers about the crash, and did you provide them the videos?
Yes, we did.
And Your Honor, I'm going to offer Exhibit 36, which is a portion of that video.
Any objection to 36? There being no objection, 36 will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
Okay, I'm going to run the video now, okay? Now, if we could just pause this here for a moment, please. And so do you recognize this video?
Yes, I do.
And can you describe for the jurors, that yard that's really in the center of the photograph, whose yard is that?
Yes, sir, that's our yard. You can see the swing set in the backyard and the gate going into our backyard.
So this is sort of a side yard?
Yes, yes.
And what is the roadway in the photograph?
That's 63rd Avenue.
Okay. And then towards the top of the photograph, there's a street that goes off away from your home. Do you know which street that is?
That's Catherine Avenue.
And so this is just security video, a security camera that you have on the outside of your home.
Yes, sir.
And then we will, the timestamp on the top of the security video, do you believe that to be accurate recording
do.
of the time? I'm sorry.
Yes, I do.
Okay. And then let's go ahead and play. And let's pause right here for a moment, please. And I guess just for the record, we're looking here at the timestamp of 2:02:24, correct?
Yes.
Now, you told us earlier that you saw two vehicles that you believed had been involved in a crash. Why did you think that they were the ones involved in the crash when you went out there?
Because there normally aren't cars in that position on the sidewalks, I suppose.
Yeah. You were thinking that's a dumb question, right? But was there also damage that you noticed to both cars?
I did. The gray car on the south side of the road was heavily damaged. The white car had some damage. I couldn't tell very well because the police car had pulled up, so I couldn't really see much damage. It was just the positioning of the vehicle that led me to believe it was involved.
So if you could, again, take that stylus. I know the gray car is kind of hard to see, but kind of draw a circle around that, where that gray car is. Okay. And then the other car involved in the crash, can you draw a circle around that?
Yeah.
And is that also the police car that you
Yes.
saw arrive? All right. So. And then let's just let the exhibit run, please. All right, so let's pause it right here, please. I'm just going to stop this here, and for the record, the timestamp indicates 2:02:47. After hearing the crash, did you go outside and observe what was going on?
Yes, I did.
And as we look at this Exhibit 36, can you just kind of describe for the jurors where you went? Well, let me ask it this way. How long were you outside there that day?
I would say the remainder of the day. We were out there for all the events that unfolded.
And while you were out there, did you just kind of stay in the area that's depicted here in the security video?
I stayed here for quite a while and then went to my neighbor's. Well, I don't remember exactly what sequence. Actually, I was in the front for a while, went into the backyard. By the time I got back there, the people in the gray car that were on the sidewalk closest to us were no longer in the vehicle. And at some point in the day, I was at my neighbor's house across the street. Not in this picture, they're not.
Fair to say that there was a lot of police officers that responded to this.
Yes, sir.
And did you also then sort of help with some bystanders or some other people in the area eventually?
After hours, it was a chilly day, chilly April day, and the family of Daunte showed up. I assumed that his mother had arrived because she was very, very visibly upset, and I overheard somebody say that was his mother. After a while, other people that I assumed were family showed up, and there's a retaining wall right there on the right. That's where they were sitting, right next to our yard. After a few hours, we brought out a couple chairs. I don't think Daunte's mother and father were still there. Just from what I've learned after the fact, I think it was his brother and a young woman. We brought him a couple chairs and a blanket.
So what I think we should probably do is just let Exhibit 36 run to the end, please. Okay. That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you. You may step down. The state may call its next witness.
This time, Your Honor, the state calls Officer Alan Salvosa.
Okay, good morning, officer. Will you please come forward? Stand behind the witness chair, which is right next to me.
Yes, Your Honor.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify?
I do, Your Honor.
Please have a seat.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And then please remove your mask. And state your full name and spell it.
It's Alan, A-L-A-N, Douglas, D-O-U-G-L-A-S, last of Salvosa, S-A-L, V as in Victor, O-S-A.
Okay, officer, just a couple of reminders. Yes or no answers. Don't shake your head. Don't say uh-huh or uh-uh. Only one person can talk at a time. Please wait until the question is finished before you answer. If you don't understand a question, let the lawyer know. And finally, if an objection is made, stop talking. Don't answer unless I tell you to.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Counsel?
Good morning. Could you please state your occupation for the record?
I'm a police officer of the City of Brooklyn Center, sir.
How long have you been a police officer?
Going on 12 years in January, sir.
Did you work anywhere in the law enforcement capacity prior to joining the Brooklyn Center Police Department 12 years ago?
I was in a non-sworn position with the Richfield Police Department. Otherwise, all my sworn experience has been with the Brooklyn Center Police Department, sir.
And throughout that time, you've been a licensed peace officer?
Yes, sir.
And you take continuing education courses to maintain that license?
Yes, sir.
And you're trained to respond to emergencies?
Yes, sir.
And in report writing?
Yes, sir.
Do you have a specific assignment with the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
I am in the patrol division, sir.
And when working on patrol, are you equipped with a body-worn camera?
Yes, sir.
Could you describe how that works?
The body-worn camera would sit basically on my chest. It can be activated by me pressing the button, or it has certain triggers. It's linked to my squad car camera. So if I turn on my squad car and hit the lights and sirens, it automatically syncs and will also activate. Kind of a nutshell how it works, sorry.
And that video is retained after your shift and can be reviewed later, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
As a patrol officer, could you explain your duties?
The duties are to respond to 911 calls for service if people call 911. I have to respond, take reports. We do proactive patrol, investigate suspicious persons, respond to medical emergencies, do traffic enforcement, kind of jack of all trades, I guess.
Mm-hmm. When you're on patrol, do you travel in a marked squad?
Yes, sir. Sometimes in an unmarked, but for the most part, a marked squad.
Okay. And how many officers are typically in a squad car in Brooklyn Center?
Typically one, unless you're in a training position, sir.
So, unless you're in a training position, you're driving one person in a squad.
Yes, sir.
And when you're working on patrol, are there other officers on patrol in other squads during your shift?
Yes, sir.
How many in a typical shift, assuming full staff?
Anywhere from 3 to 7, depending on shift minimums and the time of day, sir.
Is there a supervising officer also on duty?
Yes, sir.
Is that person typically of the sergeant rank?
Yes, sir. Typically it would be a sergeant. Unless there isn't a sergeant, then it would fall to the most senior officer.
Is it common to refer to that type of sergeant as a patrol sergeant?
Yes, sir.
And with regard to the 3 to 7 officers on a given shift, do you communicate with each other during the shift?
Yes, sir.
How do you communicate with other officers?
Typically by the radio, we have our dispatch channel, a channel where we can speak to other Brooklyn Center officers, email, we can send each other messages through our computer system, and obviously cell phones.
Is radio to radio communication a common part of your shift?
Yes, sir.
And how big is your patrol area?
The city of Brooklyn Center is 8 square miles, and it's broken up into 5 districts. So about 1/5 of an 8 square mile, depending on what district you're assigned to.
Do individual patrol officers stay in their districts during the course of the shift, or do you drive throughout those districts?
You can drive throughout the city. You just have to be able to respond to your specific district.
So you essentially have a zone coverage during the...
Yes, sir.
Now I have a few questions about how patrol officers assist each other during their shifts. Let's say you have an individual stop for something basic like speeding. Do you communicate that you're out stopping a vehicle to your fellow officers?
Yes, sir.
How do you do that?
You would radio the dispatcher and basically say that you're out on a traffic stop or stopping a vehicle for whatever reason, or depending on the type of call, you would basically use your call number and then tell the dispatcher what you're doing. It would be something to the effect of, 3219, I'm on a traffic stop with whatever the license plate was, or 3219, I'm stopping a suspicious person, and then give the location of your stop.
Does that prompt other officers on your shift to do anything automatically?
Yes.
And what is that?
Oh, if they're in the area, they would probably start to your location. They would obviously look at their computer and see that you were assigned to something. They would hear it over the radio, and so they would have an idea that you're out with something, and if they were close, typically they would try to respond, or they would maybe ask you if you needed backup, depending on the type of call.
That sort of response, do you have to specifically ask for it, or is it just part of the practice of how you support each other during a given shift?
It's a bit of both. Sometimes, depending on the location or the level of training of the officer, you might ask them if they need backup. Sometimes if you're close, you might respond. Other times, if it's not that big a deal, you might just acknowledge that you hear them, but it all just depends on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. How often during a typical shift would a sergeant stop to support you?
Depends. Probably a couple times a shift, depending on how busy it is, or if he's close by a call, he will stop by. If it's any major call, a supervisor will always try to stop out.
Okay. I have a couple questions specifically about you, Officer Salvosa. Have you held any specific assignments or duties during your time with the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
Yes, sir.
Could you tell us about those assignments?
I am a field training officer. I was on the SWAT team, and I'm on the West Metro Mobile Command Field Force.
Okay, let's break each of those down. Maybe first, could you explain what it means to be a member of the SWAT team?
I'm a member of the SWAT team of Brooklyn Center. Basically, we respond to high-risk calls for service, barricaded suspects, warrants, and things like that, where you typically need a higher level of response than just a patrol response, hostage negotiation, things like that.
Okay. And what about the West Command Mobile Field Force?
That's a joint partnership with other agencies for civil unrest and things like that. Basically, we would be the guys that would be out there, depending on the level of civil unrest, to kind of protect buildings and property and life.
Okay. Now, in terms of being a field training officer, how long have you been a field training officer?
Approximately 5 or 6 years, sir.
Could you explain what a field training officer is?
Field training officer is someone who takes new recruits or new people to Brooklyn Center who are becoming cops and has to train them and evaluate them, monitor their progress, and make recommendations whether they move to the next level of training or identifies additional things they would need to improve on before successfully moving on as a police officer in the city of Brooklyn Center.
Does being a field training officer require any special skills or training?
Yes, typically you'd have to have some time with the Brooklyn Center Police Department. You'd have to show knowledge of craft, discipline, some leadership, some mentoring. You'd have to go to a specialized school to be certified to be a field trainer.
Okay. And it does require a good understanding of policy?
Yes, a working knowledge.
Now, describe how a given day may be different when you're serving in your role as a field training officer or FTO versus not being an FTO on that day.
If I was an FTO, and I'd have a lot more freedom, there's a lot more, I'm just by myself, I respond to my calls, I can do whatever I want, essentially, in terms of how I want to patrol or how I want my day to go. I'd still respond to calls, but there's a lot less paperwork. As a field trainer, there's a lot more mentoring, a lot more training, a lot more paperwork, a lot more trying to evaluate and test your probation or your trainer, your trainee.
And part of that is intending to impart policy and reasonable practice on them, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One additional background topic. Have you ever needed to provide any emergency medical aid during the course of your career?
Yes, sir.
I just want to talk about that for a minute. What medical training have you received as a Brooklyn Center police officer?
First responder certified EMR, basically first aid, CPR, how to treat wounds, how to triage, things like that.
Okay. And how often have you utilized that degree of medical training in the field?
Almost daily on a shift. We're always responding to some type of medical, whether it's someone feeling sick, someone who fell down, someone who has a head injury, car accidents, heart attacks, strokes, all kinds of medical situations. Anytime anyone would call 911 for a medical emergency, police would typically respond depending on how busy we were.
Okay. Now, during your career, prior to April 11th of 2021, did you work with a fellow officer named Kim Potter?
Yes, sir.
Could you describe how you knew her?
She was officer when I started.
And did you know her professionally throughout your career?
Yes, sir. I've known her since I've been a police officer.
Beyond your role as a fellow police officer, did you have any other interactions with her in a professional capacity?
Yes, she was the union president.
The president of the police union?
Yes, sir.
And she was available to, if you needed to speak to her on issues of advice, etc.
Yes, sir.
If you saw her in person, would you recognize her?
Yes, sir.
Is she seated in the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
I will stipulate that it's a Kim Potter sitting next to me.
All right.
Given your experience with Officer Potter, do you believe that you engaged in radio communication with her in the past?
Yes, sir.
Given that experience, do you believe that you would have the ability to recognize her voice over the radio?
Yes, sir.
I now want to discuss the events of April 11th of 2021. Do you recall that day?
Yes, sir.
Were you on duty?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what your shift was?
I believe it was a power shift or a day shift. I'm not certain, but I was working either a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or an 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Okay. At approximately 2 p.m., you were on duty, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what you were doing?
I believe I was grabbing lunch.
Did you receive any communication from any fellow officers around that time?
Yes, sir.
And what communication was that?
I heard over the radio that Officer Lucky had initiated a traffic stop somewhere on 63rd Avenue North in Brooklyn Center.
Okay. Did you respond to that information?
I acknowledged it. I heard it over the radio, but I didn't acknowledge it.
Okay. Did you respond to that information?
Yes.
And how did you respond?
I decided to drive towards that traffic stop.
As you responded, did you know any other information about that traffic stop beyond that it was a vehicle which was stopped?
I believe there was some communication about possibly having a warrant attached to the vehicle or person, and they wanted another squad.
Now, I have just another question about 63rd Avenue. Would you agree that this is a well-traveled road in Brooklyn Center?
Yes, sir.
Is that a road that you as a patrol officer have spent some time on?
Yes, sir.
A lot of cars going by?
Yes, sir. It's a major artery. You can essentially get from the center of the city all the way into Brooklyn Park.
And you're traveling in that squad car by yourself that day, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you make it to the actual location of the traffic stop?
No, sir.
And why did you not?
Prior to arriving on the traffic stop, as I was driving westbound, I was probably a block and a half away when I observed. I could see the flashing lights of Officer Lucky's squad car. I observed a white Buick take off from that traffic stop at a high rate of speed. It crossed the eastbound lane onto the westbound lane, essentially coming directly head-on at me, and it collided with a vehicle in front of me, sir.
And could you give the cross streets of where you saw that collision take place?
Approximately 63rd and Catherine Drive, sir.
Was that a startling observation for you at that time?
Yes, sir.
What did you do when you saw that crash?
I immediately got on the radio. I notified the dispatcher that I had a PI accident or personal injury accident stemming from a flee from the traffic stop. I asked for an ambulance to come immediately to the area. The vehicle, after it hit the car in front of me, the car that it hit went to my left, or basically south, and stopped. The Buick basically hit the car and came to a rest on the corner of 63rd and Catherine in the northwest corner. It had heavy front end damage. It was heavily tinted. Because it was a fleeing vehicle from a traffic stop and it was a felony crime, I took my handgun out and pointed it at the vehicle. I ordered everyone in the vehicle to put their hands up, even though I couldn't see. And I called for additional help, sir.
Did you see any other officers in that area?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, beyond Officer Lucky's squad in front of you?
No, sir.
Would you agree that traffic was still traveling back and forth on 63rd?
Yes, sir.
And as you arrived, did you have any information about the medical condition of anyone in that Buick?
No, sir, not as I arrived initially. The windows were rolled up. It was tinted. I couldn't see inside.
Yep. And was there any information about the medical status of those individuals communicated to you via radio at that time?
No. There may have been, but I didn't hear it because I was yelling at the car trying to get them to put their hands up.
Did you know whether anyone had a basis to believe that an occupant had a weapon at that time?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, sir?
Did you know whether anyone had a basis to believe that anyone had a weapon in that vehicle?
I did not have specific information that that car had a weapon at the time, no.
Did you receive any information from any of the officers at the scene of the traffic stop at that time?
I don't recall. There may have been, but I was yelling at the car to get their hands up, so.
How about Officer Potter specifically? Do you remember her reporting anything to you over the radio about the condition of anyone in that Buick?
No, sir.
Were you surprised that you didn't receive any information from anyone at the traffic stop?
I was confused.
Would it have helped you to learn more information about the occupants in the vehicle at that time?
Your objection is irrelevant in the conclusion of the witness.
Do you want to rephrase the question, counsel, please?
You had previously testified you didn't know how many people were in the vehicle or what was going on in that vehicle. Would it have helped you to know more information about what was going on in the vehicle as you approached?
Which vehicle are we talking
The
about?
white Buick, Officer Salvoso.
It may have helped depending on what the information was.
Okay. So as you arrived and you directed the occupants of the white Buick at gunpoint, could you see anything in the vehicle at that time?
I saw some movement, but it was heavily tinted. So it was kind of hard to see. I could discern movement. That was about it.
Did you attempt to address the occupants in the vehicle?
Yes, I gave several commands for them to put their hands up.
And did you see any physical response to your commands?
There was some movement, and at some point the passenger lowered her window.
And was there any verbal response at that time?
I think the passenger said, "I can't," or something similar, and then the passenger said something about, "He's not breathing."
Under those circumstances, would you describe your tone at that point?
It was aggressive. It was a little bit amped up because of the flea, and I had him at gunpoint.
As you were communicating with those occupants, did you have any other communication with fellow officers?
I asked for additional squads to help me. I informed them that the passenger and the victim were not cooperating. There was a lot of movement. They wouldn't exit the vehicle. I believe I updated that the male was possibly not breathing, and I needed additional help because I was by myself to address the issue and try to get the male out to get him help.
After a period of time, were you able to have some communication with the individual in the passenger seat?
Yes.
And could you describe this individual, her appearance?
She was a female. She had some facial injuries from the crash. She was crying.
Do you recall whether that individual gave you further information?
Just that he wasn't breathing, the male driver.
And based on your observations, did you see anything that contradicted her account that he was not breathing?
I could barely see him. He was kind of slumped back in the driver's seat.
So you'd agree that for a period of several minutes, you held the white Buick at gunpoint. No one came in or out of the vehicle.
Object to that is leading and repetitious, Your Honor.
I'll let you answer that question. The objection is overruled.
Can you repeat the question, sir?
I said you'd agree that for a period of several minutes, you held the white Buick at gunpoint and no one came in or out of the vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Did other officers arrive at the scene eventually?
Yes, sir.
How long did it take for other officers to arrive?
It felt like forever, but probably a couple minutes.
Did multiple squads arrive?
Yes, sir.
Were they all from Brooklyn Center?
No, sir. There was multiple agencies. Hennepin County, Brooklyn Park, Champlin, Crystal, I think Robbinsdale. I don't know the specifics, but those ones I know for sure were there.
When they arrived, did you interact with these other officers?
Yes.
Could you describe your interactions?
I briefed them initially on what I had, that the vehicle that I had my gun pointed at was a fleeing vehicle from the traffic stop. There was one passenger in the front seat, one driver, and there was potentially a passenger in the back seat because I couldn't see into the back seat, but I assumed there was.
And did you, at that point, with your fellow officers, make a plan of what to do next?
Yep, we kind of talked about it, and then a supervisor arrived on scene, and we started coordinating what the next steps would be to safely remove the passenger, remove the driver, and then provide aid.
At that point, did you have further verbal interaction with the occupants of the vehicle?
Other than telling them to put their hands up, I think I told the female several times to get out of the car so we can help the driver, because I knew time was of the essence and he wasn't breathing, but there was no way to safely go up there without her cooperation.
Yep. And what did she do in response to that?
Eventually she got out of the vehicle, put her hands up, and then walked towards another officer that gave her commands.
Did you have any direct interaction with her?
After that point, no, sir.
Do you know where she went after that encounter?
I believe she was placed in the back of a squad car.
Okay. Now, after the females removed from the vehicle, could you see any activity in the Buick?
Very limited. I think the driver was still in the driver's seat. The back door was still closed. It was still tinted. And we were kind of gathering information as to whether there was another party in the car and what we could see and kind of coordinate the response.
So at that time you didn't know whether it was just the driver or whether there were other individuals in the vehicle?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Eventually, did you confirm how many individuals were in that vehicle?
Yes, sir. We were kind of able to get a better view. I think as more officers arrived, they had better angles of view into the car. I think someone had spoken to the female who basically said it was just her and the male driver.
Beyond the information that he appeared to be injured and the visual